All right, today I'm talking to Kaylee benYosef, and she's going to tell us about how she has structured her English 300 writing in the disciplines class this semester, some particular assignments and ways that the reading and drafting and peer response is cycled into small chunks throughout that seems to have been a really productive cycle for her.
Yeah, so the first assignment that they start with is actually a goals analysis. So they look back at their history of all the choices that they made in every event that occurred in their life that brought them to that point of saying, oh, I want to pursue this as my major, and they write about that. And then that helps them to complete all of the rest. It sets them up well to complete the rest of the coursework in the semester. So it sets them up to figure out, what am I doing here? What am I curious about? And then that sets them up for beginning to research. So then they kind of start looking at their field through a critical lens, doing kind of a rhetorical analysis on publications that have been made in their field, and figuring out, what are other people talking about right now, what's popular in my field, and how are they talking about it. And so then after that, they do an annotated bibliography and a topic proposal. So we gradually keep narrowing down to, what are you going to write about? What is your research essay going to look like? Until finally they get to that point of writing the research essay. And during that period of time that we're writing the research essay itself, is when I structure the class in kind of a patternistic approach of, on Mondays, outside of the first week, obviously, but on Mondays, we look back at the readings that we did of other popular research papers, or research papers from other people in different English 300 classes, things like that. And we look at, what did they do correctly? What did they, what could they have revised or edited to have been more clear, or to fit within their formatting better, or to get their idea across to the reader better? And we, after spending 2 days of the previous week looking at those readings and breaking them down and discussing them as a class, we then turn around and the next Monday start talking about, how can we implement those things in our writings? And typically what I'll do when we're in the discussion is I'll be taking notes up on the board, and I just make 2 columns. I make a, what did they do well side, and then could they improve side. And then I'll take pictures of those and upload those to Blackboard so anybody who missed class can see them. And then I'll use those pictures of those notes that we made during our discussions over the readings to help formulate a checklist of, what are things that we're going to try to incorporate in our paper based on the readings that we had looked at last week. And these checklists I found are really useful for students because I format each of the bullets as positive statements. So like, even if what we detected in the paper was something negative, like they didn't have a title, or their in-text citations were wrong and all over the place, I'll format it as a positive statement of like, I will make sure that my paper has a title. I will make sure that my citations are appropriate, or that my topic sentence that my body paragraph fits within that topic sentence and doesn't stray too far from it. Things like that. We've also gotten into talking about like synthesis and synthesizing our sources, and rather than just keeping them compartmentalized of like 3 quotes from the same source back to back, we have our sources talk to each other, things like that. And so it's really useful for them to go just week by week with those checklists, and making sure that they have all of the things that we've been talking about through our reading discussions. And then after they spend roughly about half of the class using those checklists to actually get some drafting done, or even get some revising done based on what they already have, then we use the other half of that class to do like what's kind of a mini workshop. So they'll show each other what they've been working on, what they have been trying to do to meet the checklist requirements for that day, and then they'll be able to give each other that feedback. And I typically tend to circulate around during that discussion part of things, listen to what they're talking about, the advice they're giving to each other, and things like that. So I tend to find it really beneficial. But another thing that I have found is important for them too is to have like a way to ease into the day, especially on like the drafting and workshop days, but I do it on the discussion days as well. And I do that through just like a 5-minute free write. So I'll put a prompt up there for them to respond to that's usually something creative and fun, like talking about a dream they had, trying to write that as like a clear narrative. Or I think last class I said, a cat told you about how to be a better human. What was the advice it gave you and how did it benefit you? And so it's just something light and fun that they just write for 5 minutes in response to that. And it really helps them get in that mindset of like, okay, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to write, I'm going to actually like focus on this class and the fact that it's an English class and a writing class. So,
yeah. That seems like a very useful practice to have a low stakes free write, get them into that writing mode, because I've found that students can be sometimes resistant to actually writing in class because they think, unless I'm, in my room with no one else around, I'm not going to be able to focus. And so learning to write and be able to shape your mental focus when you don't have total control over the environment is a really important skill to develop.
For sure, yeah. And I've also noticed that I've had several students who at first they're really hesitant to do the free writes. They're like, well, I don't want to. And I'm like, okay, but you're not sharing this with anybody. Like, it's a journal, so it's just going to be sent to me. I'm the only one that's going to see it just so that I can give you a grade for it. It's like a 2-point grade. Yeah. And I've seen those students go from, I don't want to do this because I don't want to write with people around me who can like see my screen and stuff, to this is really helpful for me to get in that mindset of like, I'm going to write, and even if it's bad, it doesn't really matter kind of thing. So I've seen it be very useful for students in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. And I think that whole structuring of the class with that prominent day for writing and feedback to really break up that whole big, long research paper task into small, manageable chunks is another way to get them to do something that can be really hard for them to do, in maybe trying to balance other things that seem more imminently crucial in their schedule once they get out of the classroom, but also just getting started can be a hard thing, and that seems like really useful to do that. And so very good writing pedagogy, but it also seems to me to be even more critical at this moment when we worry as instructors about AI taking too much of a role possibly in their composing when we don't really see how it gets started. Do you have any thoughts about that mini workshop practice during this time of AI anxiety?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, the AI anxiety is always there, especially when I'm going through and grading stuff. I'm like, oh gosh. But I found that with this process that I've developed, and with these mini workshops and stuff especially, they actually tend to hold each other accountable more often than not. And I think also too, the fact that they know they're always checking in with their peers, they're always like having that day or that opportunity to have other people look at what they've done. I think that it really allows them to think to themselves like, okay, I had the first half of this class to actually do my own writing, and so I should have something here that is my own thing to share with my peers. And I think that social pressure kind of helps them avoid using AI, because nobody really wants to sit there and turn to the person next to them and be like, so I used AI.
Yeah.
Out of fear of them being like, okay, should I tell the teacher about this or something? Yeah. Right? So I think that in terms of making the writing process for this research paper a little bit more social, I think that's helped in kind of cutting down AI usage and issues with AI. But I also think that just giving them as much in-class writing time as possible, and then also being like in a classroom environment where you can circulate around, definitely kind of puts that just even environmental pressure on them of like, I can't pull up an AI, like, creation tool in this setting. She could see me at any minute or anything like that. So yeah, it definitely, through peer pressure and just the social aspect of it and even the environment, I really do think that it cuts down a lot on AI usage.
Yeah, and then once they have the ball rolling and they have things drafted and week by week they have built up maybe paragraph by paragraph toward this essay, and they're less likely to be tempted in that, oh no, I've waited too long moment, because they will not have had that moment unless they haven't been coming to class. Do you usually have them work with the same partner, or does that vary a lot over the semester?
I try to kind of vary it up. And so typically from about the beginning of the semester to halfway through the semester, I try to always tell them, like, work with somebody you haven't worked with before. And then at that halfway point, I try to be like, okay, you've worked with many people in the class now. I think that at this point you should know who you work best with and who you like their feedback best. And so you can go and you can work with that person. But if you're still unsure, you haven't like encountered somebody that you're like, oh, we just click when we're working together, then I always encourage them, like, then try somebody brand new, or maybe make a group of 3 and see if maybe adding another person into the dynamic would be helpful. So I always try to make it kind of like not limited, so that they can kind of experiment with it on their own and figure out what works best for them and their group members. But typically, I do find that a lot of people are like, no, we work well together, so we're just going to stick together. Or we're friends, so we're just going to, continue to work together. But especially at the beginning of the semester, I try to get everybody, like, shuffling around and meeting new people, because, you might get stuck with somebody at the beginning of the semester, and if you're stuck with them for the whole semester, you might be like, oh, this sucks. So I never want to put them in a negative position like that or anything. So I always try to give them that ability to change things up if they think it would benefit them, for sure.
Yeah, that's a really good point. In your selection of the sample papers for the readings each week, do you look for particular features that you kind of hope the discussion and analysis highlights, or is it more random and the same things may come up again and again?
No, I do try to look at, like, what did we talk about last week? It's definitely kind of random at the beginning, because we don't have anything to go off of. So I'm like, what are we gonna, let's just choose a couple random things. I try to pick topics that are related to some of the topics that students in the class have. So like if I have a lot of students who are talking about healthcare or something, I might pick a healthcare related paper for us to read. Or if they're talking about like social dynamics or social media or something, I'll pick something like that at the beginning. But typically what I do for the weeks after that first week is I'll be like, okay, what was our checklist that we created, or what is the checklist I plan to create for them? And then how can I select readings that are not going to necessarily hit on that, those same elements, but that are going to introduce something new. So it is a very careful selection process. And I do typically run through like 5 to 10 different papers, just narrowing them down to like, okay, I think we could talk about this, we could talk about this, just based on what is present in the paper and what is lacking from the paper. And then typically they're smart enough to detect everything that I was hoping that they would detect. But if there's something big that I feel like they didn't quite hit on, I'll try to gear the discussion in that direction, just being like, well, what do we think about their body paragraphs? Or what do we think about the sources that they chose? Do those seem reliable or effective? Things like that. So you can, I think with this approach and this model, it allows that flexibility of giving them the time to analyze it themselves, but also being familiar enough with the reading as a professor to guide that discussion if you feel that's something that's necessary because they're just missing some of the major points that you wanted to bring up.
How many papers do they typically discuss on the Wednesday and Friday of the reading discussions?
With a I think it's a 55-minute class, we only discuss one paper.
Okay.
But occasionally I have had days where we discuss one paper rather quickly, and I have like a backup paper that I have them briefly look over, and then we'll discuss that. So I always have kind of like a secondary reading for one day, in case, but that's really only happened like twice this semester, so.
Okay. All right. I think that's about all I had thought to ask. Is there anything else you wanted to add about how this structure has worked out for you, especially since this is the first time you've taught this class, this 300 level writing in the disciplines class, which it seemed like it was fairly different animal at first.
Oh yeah.
How pleased are you with this, looking forward to how you would teach your next 300? How much of this that you've talked about today do you think you're going to carry forward, and any little tweaks you can think of?
I think I'll probably carry forward like a majority of it. There's really not been much that I'm like, oh, that didn't work out the way I planned or anything like that. Everything has kind of gone according to plan, and has actually typically been more beneficial than I expected it to be. So I really like what I came up with. I definitely didn't expect it to unfold in this way at all. Like this approach of like the kind of cyclical, design that I've created for when they're writing the research essay, that was just something I thought of like overnight. I was like, oh, this would be so cool. So I'm just really glad that it worked out. But I'm always looking for ways that I can improve my teaching, and I'm always looking for ways that I can like, do something that hasn't been done before and just see if it works. Luckily this time it worked. But I'm sure that there's going to be something that I think about over the break, or something that, next semester, with my 2 English 300s, that I'm going to try to implement then. And also I think that the students themselves determine whether something really works or not. So I'm going to be interested to see how this approach carries into the next semesters that I continue to teach, and like how the different groups either cling to it like this group has, or if it doesn't work and I'm going to be like, oh boy, I have to start kind of adapting and thinking on my feet. But yeah, so far I'm going to stick with the plan and then change it if it needs to change.
Thank you very much.